my number 4 is also my doubles as my sleeper. Number 4 tight end Zach Miller, tight end from Oakland. Listen, they're at New Orleans. Oakland is at New Orleans. Oakland's not a good team, but man, New Orleans is really, really just letting teams score. It's hard to even, New Orleans is never known for their defense, but man, are they just, it's costing them games. And if there were ever a time for Oakland to look like a decent offensive team, it'll be this week against New Orleans. And Zach Miller, I can tell you this, is a real deal as a tight end. All right, if he was in a more consistent offense, he would put up more consistent numbers. But talent-wise, he's there. This week, Zach Miller at New Orleans, I cracks my top 5. Right? He cracks my top 4. That's all I did. So Zach Miller it is. Sleeper picks. All right, and these are guys that are under the radar a little bit, guys you wouldn't think are going to have that big of a week, guys you may not know about, but and guys you may be able to just pick up and start. My first sleeper, and like I said, I just give you one at each position. My first sleeper at quarterback, and this guy, you would never think this guy would ever be called a sleeper, but he is. He is because of how bad the team's been. Matt Hasselbeck, all right? Listen, I know this is a guy going in a lot of preseason forecasts. This guy's a top 10 quarterback. There's no way he should ever be a sleeper. But as bad as Seattle's been, and as bad as the numbers Hasselbeck has been putting up have been, this week against Green Bay, who by reputation has a tough defense, but statistically do not. If you take a look at the stats, Green Bay's not stopping anyone. And they're not. They're not stopping anybody. So, take a look at the stats. Green Bay, not that good on defense. Hasselbeck does now have a couple of his receivers back. And Bobby Ingram, Deion Branch, I believe, is playing also. So, look for Hasselbeck to put up a decent game. There it is. To put up a decent game this week. If you have a bye, if your quarterback's on bye, which, by the way, open dates this week are Buffalo, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee. Not many guys you'd be rolling with. Maybe you're rolling with Trent Edwards. Maybe you're rolling with Ben Roethlisberger. So if these guys have a bye and you somehow have Hasselbeck, I think he's going to have a nice week. I think he's going to have a pretty nice week. The Green Bay defense just hasn't been able to stop anyone, and Hasselbeck has a few of his receivers back. So things should look a little better in Seattle. I still think they'll lose that game, though. Running back. LaRon McClain, Baltimore running back at Indy. Listen, Indy hasn't been able to stop anyone on the ground. And their pass defense is misleading. If you look, they have a top 5 pass defense, and you think, oh, holy cow, well, that's great. It's only because teams don't throw the ball because they don't have to. You can run all over Indy this year, and Bob Sanders being out certainly doesn't help. LaRon McClain is getting more touches than Ray Rice in Baltimore as a backup for Willis McGahee. And McGahee hasn't finished a game. I don't know if he finished a game last week before he sure didn't, and no weeks leading up to it. He is one good hit away from being out of any game. And this McClain kid is taking more and more carries, and he's actually punching in some touchdowns. So, he's my sleeper pick if you're in a bind this week at running back, and you can somehow get your hands on LaRon McClain. Could pay off for you nicely. Wide receiver sleeper pick, Minnesota receiver Bernard Berrien. This guy has been a non-factor for the first 4 weeks of the season. He maybe even just got dropped flat out in some leagues because people thought, well, Minnesota has no passing game, which they don't. But this week, at home against Detroit, Berrien could follow up his 110 yards with a touchdown last week with another equally impressive performance because Detroit is really, really bad. And now, with Farad in there throwing the ball and not Tavares Jackson, we have a little more accuracy, a little more, a little more comfort, a little more know-how at the quarterback level. Listen, not that I love Gus Farad. I'm not a Farad fan. It's not like he's stuck anywhere he's been and just been a starter, but he's serviceable, and he can get the ball approximately where it needs to be. At least he can better than Tavares Jackson. So I like Berrien against Detroit to have another nice week and worthy of a sleeper pick this week. And like I said earlier, tight end Zach Miller from Oakland at New Orleans. If you haven't heard of him yet, you will soon enough. The kid's a real deal. Let's get to the letdowns. A lot of people call them busts. I like to say letdown, because these are guys who I think will just underperform. Not necessarily lay an egg for you, but underperform. And my letdowns of the week are at quarterback, Matt Schaub. Houston quarterback Matt Schaub. I may just be angry because he cost me a game last week in one of my leagues. I had him in as my starting quarterback. I didn't know he went down with the stomach virus, so I had him plugged in. I played a game without a quarterback and lost, naturally. And I'm bitter. So Matt Schaub is my letdown for this week also. But it's not just because he screwed me over last week. Listen, Miami, that's who Houston's playing, by the way, is Miami. Miami's a better team than people realize. At 2-2, maybe people are starting to figure it out. Miami's a better team than people realize. And Matt Schaub, coming off of a stomach virus, some sort of sickness, which must have been serious because, guys don't just miss football games in the NFL unless there's something bad. So he must have had something wrong with his stomach. I'm guessing he doesn't bounce right back and have a big game against Miami. I think Miami might put one on Houston. And Matt Schaub, letdown of the week at quarterback. Running back, and this is a guy who I've said all along is a matchup running back, and it has worked out perfectly that way. Anytime he runs up against a tough defense, basically non-existent. And he's sort of a weak defense. This guy's a number one running back in the league. Michael Bernard Turner from Atlanta is that guy. He's ultimate matchup running back. Him and Larry Johnson are both ultimate matchup running backs. Holy cow, I'm burning down the house. All right. But Michael Turner this week plays host, Atlanta plays host to Chicago, who is a really, really tough defense like they were before. And I think that they will be keyed in on Michael Bernard Turner and just trying to shut him down. And that they have the speed at linebacker to do it. So, he's my letdown of the week. My wide receiver letdown of the week is Roy Williams in Detroit. Now, Roy had a decent week last week. All right. Detroit was playing Chicago. Roy Williams was matched up on a rookie cornerback because I believe Nathan Vasher was out. And he dropped quite a few balls. But he still, in our league, which is point perception, he still walked away with about 16 points, which is good. He may be somewhat of a popular play this week because people are thinking, well, look at Roy Williams is getting more involved in the offense. And this week, Detroit, who is supposed to turn into a pass-happy team, which of course they should, they're playing Minnesota, who has no pass defense. So that equals a big game for Roy Williams. Listen, I don't think so. I think in Detroit they will be going back to Calvin Johnson hard and heavy. They really, really will. He basically did nothing last week. He was locked down by Tillman of Chicago. And this week against Minnesota, like I said, they can't stop the pass. I think Calvin Johnson has a huge game. Roy Williams, not so much. Not so much. Don't get too excited about Roy Williams because of last week and in his matchup this week, because this week will be all about Calvin Johnson.